Hey!
Welcome to Nerd Herd Live-ish, almost live. What are we
Nearly
calling
live.
Nearly live.
it? Nearly live.
Live-esque.
It was live when we did it, but not when you see it.
Yeah.
Hey.
Nerd Herd unedited.
Unedited Nerd Herd Live.
I mean, I feel like
Not
it's
live.
always unedited.
It's very fair. That is by definition live.
Live.
Yeah.
So some context around what you've just heard and why you're probably confused, because in fact our show's name is Nerd Herd Live and we are not live. So we are recording this on the night before Wednesday, and we've never used StreamYard to do this, and we're hoping it works. So we're going to record and then schedule or just post. We're going to see what happens tomorrow night. Things were all great, and we had great big plans for our Thursday live show. And then screenings rained down upon us. And
Good news for you, bad news for our schedule.
bad news for our schedule. And bad news for Jen, who really wanted to see Indiana Jones.
Right!
So by the time you're watching this, we will have seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and Asteroid City, which we'll be talking about on our next show. But that is why we had to pre-record the episode tonight, because we have back-to-back screenings tomorrow across town, and we would not have been able to make our normal time work. So we ask you to bear with us through this. Normally we try to do this live, but this was an exception, and these were two movies that we really, really wanted to see. And here we are. So tune in.
Hi, audience.
Tune in for our next episode to see if this was worth it, because that will be when we're talking about those two movies. But tonight we have a great show for you. Matt and I got to visit Electric Owl Studios earlier. My weeks are messed up. Last week, which is the newest film studio to open in Atlanta. So we'll talk about that. We're also going to be sharing our reviews with you of Transformers: Rise of the Beast, The Flash, a lot to say on that, and Elemental. So without wasting time, let's dive straight into it. Matt, set up Electric Owl. Wait, no, I didn't do introductions. I'm totally off my game tonight. All right. Wait, I'm hitting pause. All right, Robert, introduce yourself.
Robert, editor-in-chief at 3F by Space. Jen?
Jen Steele. I'm a senior writer at fanbolt.com. Matt?
I am Matt Rodriguez, the owner and chief editor of Shakefire. Emma?
And I am Emma, editor-in-chief at Fanbolt. And we've done this show so many times now that I feel like we shouldn't need to introduce ourselves, but we still do.
But hey, we do.
Yeah.
In case of new viewers.
But again, tonight is a special exception, so apologies on my ordering there. Matt, set up Electric Owl Studios for us.
Yes. So, Emma and I, we got to attend the grand opening of Atlanta's newest film studio, Electric Owl Studios. It is in DeKalb County, it was about 20 minutes or so from Atlanta, the city center of Atlanta. And yeah, what sets this studio apart from all the others? We all know that Georgia is like one of the biggest film hubs in the world now. We have so many studios, from Trilith to Tyler Perry Studios to Black Hall Studios. I mean, there are just so many studios. And so Electric Owl is the newest, and they are also the greenest. So one of the things that they really reinforced was their sustainability and, recycle, reusing what they could, and basically taking advantage of everything they could in building this studio from the ground up. Because, like a lot of film studios and a lot of productions now, like they adapt to being green, and like they take in a few considerations, like, oh yeah, we're going to recycle. We're going to have our employees bring in water bottles and that kind of stuff like that. But Electric Owl basically took that from the beginning, and it's like, okay, we're going to build this studio with that in mind. So you see a lot of the infrastructure into the studio being built from the ground up with their sustainability. They have 100% LED lights throughout the studio. They have solar panels on their roofs, and that reduces electricity or their power usage by 30%. They were telling us. They have, I believe it's 48 electric vehicle charge stations that they're installing. So they have a lot of these things that is going to reduce basically their impact on the environment, which I think is great. And I don't think anybody else would disagree with me on that.
No,
one of the things like, go ahead, Emma.
I was going to say one of the things that I thought was the coolest that they talked about was with whenever you have productions come in, there's so much food. If you've ever been on set, it's an insane amount of food that is, every day for productions. Because I believe it's like every 12 hours you have to have a meal provided. Right, Matt?
Yeah. It's every 12 hours you have to have a meal. And that's for anybody. So like not just, actors, but like the cast and crew who are on set. So like you have to have food provided, a full sit down meal every 12 hours. And then I believe it's like you have to provide it's almost like a mini meal, like a snack every 6 or so hours.
And
so it's like there's a lot of food on set.
There's a lot of food, and a lot of it's really good. From the few times the set visits that I've done, the few set visits that I've done here in Atlanta specifically, like Crafty is awesome. Like it's it's this cool hangout spot that has coffee and all these like yummy snacks.
Yeah.
My favorite
Crafty is there 100% of the time too.
Right. They are.
So and that's just like the coffee and drinks and snacks and like the little prepackaged stuff that like if you're not actively doing something, you can go to Crafty, grab something to eat really quick and get back to your job kind of thing.
And I feel like it's been vastly different, not to derail us, but from the different set visits I've done, some have been extremely healthy and then some have been like just good. Like Vampire Diaries still to this day is my favorite meal and Crafty experience I've had. It was so good. Great variety, great spread, like something for everyone. My Burn Notice, which was my first set visit that I did back in, I think it was 2009, Jeffrey Donovan, he was like so all about everything being super healthy. And so we all got to like eat and we're like, there's not really anything like super like appealing here to eat.
Any flavor?
Yeah. And so we did what we could. And then like a few of us had picked up like a Coca-Cola or whatever to drink. And then he like comes and sits down with us like while we're eating, like to do his interview. And then he like criticizes all of us that had Coke. And he was like, this isn't healthy. And we're like, well, but we wanted something that tasted good. And that was like, so I feel like not to derail us, but it's like there normally is a ton of food prepared and there's a ton of food left over. And one of the cool things Electric Owl Studios was doing is they were composting that leftover food because you can't necessarily donate that food when it's been open and, on a buffet table. Yeah. So you can't necessarily donate that. So then it goes into composting and then it goes back into like mulch and stuff that can be used for like the landscaping to help
for all the plants, Emma.
For all the plants.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that was one of the cooler things. I also really liked they had this styrofoam recycler that they have. So like, building these massive sets, they use a lot of styrofoam. And styrofoam is this great lightweight material, but it does take up a lot of space. And the recycler, I forget what percentage exactly but it essentially it compresses the styrofoam. And so like when they want to get rid of it, they can ship it out. It requires less shipments to the recycling plant or whatever. to do because it takes up less space. And so they can ship more of it at once rather than making multiple trips to the recycling plant or wherever. And so they have these machines on site that basically compress the styrofoam into smaller chunks that they can then ship out, which I thought was really neat. Because like everybody, you hear about like the standard, we're going green, we're going to recycle, we're going to, have solar panels and that kind of stuff. And like what Emma said with the compost and the recycling of the styrofoam, like those I feel are kind of smaller things that you don't really think of when you think of film studio recycling and being green, but Electric Owl thought of to put into their studio. So it's really cool. I'm really looking forward to seeing what productions come out of it. And they told us like it's not going to cost anything extra to the film studios and to the productions. Like this was all built from the ground up in them, and they've already incorporated into the cost essentially of renting out the studio. So it's not like you're going to have to pay extra for, to recycle and for all this green access. Everything's already rolled into the cost of what it makes to make a film.
Awesome. You got to think too, looking at production companies who want to rent out space, by using a facility like that, if they have the sustainability statements as a publicly traded company that they need to make out there, using a studio that has that allows them to make that claim. So there's benefits to them and their shareholders by choosing that over someone else. So all the more reason to film in Georgia, not out west. Sorry.
Yeah. And it's like their lead certified gold, which is one of the leading I guess certification companies. I forget what the company is called exactly. Yeah. But, they certify, and you have to make all these they have all these check boxes and things you have to, check off when you're building to make sure you're green. And they're the greenest studio in the country, in the world, actually.
In the world.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
nice. Yeah, you see LEED on a lot of buildings, LEED, and it's everything from air quality, HVAC, energy, waste, all those things that play a factor.
Very cool.
It's super cool. It'll be super cool to see what comes in there as their first production. We're kind of in this weird period right now, which we're not going to spend too much time talking about this because hopefully it will change in the near future. But we're still very much in the depths of the writer's strike with WGA. And we are expecting, if something doesn't change, an actor's strike to happen on June 30th. Thankfully, the directors, they were up to strike earlier this month, and the studios were pretty quick to negotiate with them. So the hope is that if we get to June 30th and we do have a strike from the actors, that what will be necessary to settle that will also bring what needs to be brought to the table to satisfy things for the writers. Because until we have the writers resuming, and getting what they're asking for, or at least some sort of compromise that's acceptable for the writers, we are going to have everything being delayed. And that's really what we saw this week too. Disney pushed back a number of productions pretty significantly on some of them. Last Avatar movie is now coming out when I say we, I'll be in my late 40s by the time that movie comes out.
2031. Yeah.
I'll be 48 when that movie comes out, which is insane. But we got to push back with the number of Star Wars films, which has already been kind of a weird thing because now we're getting 2 Star Wars movies in less than a year span, like 7 months apart. And then they've fired our homeboy from Lost that was working on them that I was actually really excited about. And, the whole reason that the Han Solo.
Which one was that?
Huh?
Which one was that? The Lost one?
The Lost. Let me pull up my information so I get it correct.
I didn't hear any firing into that
movie. Yeah. It was give me a second. I want to get my facts right. Damon Lindelof was working on, which one was it? Give me a second.
I feel like they've had so many, change the guard with all these Star Wars movies where it's like they get announced and then they're like, oh, so and so is working on a Star Wars movie, and then it just goes nowhere.
The one with Damon Lindelof was interesting though. So the one that he was working on, so he was writing the one, I'm gonna butcher her name, so I'm not gonna try to say it. Jen, if you can look it up and figure out how to say it. She's known for her directing work on Miss Marvel. Charmaine, I'm not gonna try to say it because I absolutely will butcher it. So he was working on writing that one, and then Star Wars Celebrations came around, and they essentially said, Ridley was coming back. She was going to be, in the same role. We're going to be doing this, this, and this. And apparently the script that Lindelof was writing had aged her into her 80s. And there was a number of things that did not jive with what Disney announced at Star Wars Celebrations. So shortly after that, he got let go from the film.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking at it now. What do you mean an elderly Rey? They've already announced Daisy Ridley.
Yeah. So there was some lack of communication happening there.
Apparently.
But I also feel like that's what concerns me, right? Because one of the reasons why Disney says that the Han Solo movie didn't work was because they were releasing stuff too close together, theatrically speaking.
Yeah, that's why.
Which may have been part of the problem, but I think the main problem was that the script in the movie, and there's a lot of things that didn't work with Han Solo.
Well, and to be fair, with this schedule shift, they're actually going to have 3 Star Wars films within a year and a half, because 2 are now in 2026 and a third is in 2027.
Yeah. It's a lot.
I'm not too worried about the distance between them. It depends what those films are.
Right.
Like if they're all related to each other, then that's more of a problem than if they're separate adventures and stuff.
I
the biggest problem between 7, 8, and 9 was the fact that they were fighting. The directors were essentially fighting against each other. Where it's I have my own vision of what this film should be. Yeah. I'm going to ignore what you did in the previous film and go off and do my own thing. And then he's like, oh, you're going to do that, so I'm going to ignore what you're doing. And so, you just had this mess of films that just didn't connect to each other.
Yeah.
And if that's what they're going for with these new films, then, yeah, I could see that being a problem if they're not all on the same page. And I don't know.
You've got different people writing and directing each of them. We don't know what the storylines are. We know kind of loosely this one with Daisy Ridley coming back, but we don't know really what the storyline is to it. So if we have one that goes badly and they're all intertwined, we don't really have time to
fix it.
Pivot.
To fix it.
Well, and I'm hopeful that if they do more like The Mandalorian and Ahsoka coming up and explore the extended universe and get away from this linear timeline of the Skywalker saga and move beyond that, because there's so much more to talk about. They could do that many films back to back and it would be fine.
Mm-hmm.
There could be a whole film dedicated to Thrawn, frankly.
Yeah.
And I won't go into more spoilers for those still trying to catch up for Ahsoka, but I'm hopeful there's going to be a lot of opportunities there, and hopefully some more TV shows and things that they'll be able to expand upon as we get further.
Yeah. I'm sure they're going to want to bring in more of that expanded universe.
Yeah.
We had, not to dive too back into kind of the history, because we've had a fair amount of Star Wars movie updates already this year, pre the writer's strike and the timeline shifting. One of them being with Lindelof's project. But Patty Jenkins' upcoming project with Rogue Squadron has also been
Canceled.
pushed or canceled. Is it canceled? Pushed
I'm pretty sure it was canceled.
I think so. Rogue
It
Squadron.
was, at the very least, it was retooled because Rogue Squadron, I believe, was supposed to center around Cara Dune, whose actress decided to go a little off the rails.
Go to the dark side.
It's a good
Go
way.
to the dark side, shall we say?
Go to the dark side.
Yeah.
I
feel like her movie, like, I remember I thought I heard that she dropped out, or like it just got canceled.
I don't know if she dropped out or if Disney was like,
Yeah.
I mean, with all the shifting
I'm talking about
schedules.
Patty Jenkins.
right.
Yeah.
Who has also just like, again, not to take us down a tangent, has had bad luck recently because Wonder Woman 3 also got nixed.
Yeah.
But then we also saw the other Star Wars movie being removed from active development, which was being produced by Kevin Feige of Marvel Studios and Loki writer Michael Waldron, who I actually remember interviewing Waldron about getting the gig to write a Star Wars movie and him being so pumped about it. And that, God, I want to say, I don't know, that was like 2020 or 2021. So then when I read that was canceled, I was like, oh God, I know how excited he was about that. And I also think that because I love what he did with Loki, and I love everything Kevin Feige has done with Marvel. I would have loved to have seen what that movie looked like.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the silver lining is that I'm going to butcher his name too because I can never say it. Taika Waititi. I can't say it.
Taika
Waititi. I don't know. Someone else say it. Like, he does all of my favorite things, and I can't say his name because I'm terrible with names. His Star Wars movie is still moving forward. That is the good news there.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see what happens. It's gonna be years and years down the line, but we'll see.
For that,
and I'm sure there will be more changes ahead.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah,
and fans will hate it because Star Wars fans hate everything.
Exactly.
True. It's part of our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of hating, shall we move into Transformers?
Jen's just like, peace out. I'm done. I hate it.
I didn't see the movie anyway.
Jen didn't actually go to see Transformers with us. She has very strong feelings.
Tried.
You could have still, in all fairness,
because Jen has tastes.
You could have still come because it started so late. So you could have made it.
Oh darn!
Oh yeah.
Darn. Excuses. Whatever. It's fine, Jen. No.
Transformers.
All right, Robert. Take it away.
All right. So Transformers Rise of the Beasts. The synopsis is Optimus Prime and the Autobots take on their biggest challenge yet. When a new threat capable of destroying the entire planet emerges, they team up with a powerful faction of Transformers known as the Maximals. So for those that grew up on Transformers, introduction of the Maximals and Beast Wars into Transformers. This film introduces more of the time travel type story plots. And it's taking place basically in the same timeline as Bumblebee, but after Bumblebee. So the question comes up, does it rewrite everything that Michael Bay did or not? And that's left ambiguous. I don't think that it erases everything that happened, but this film is taking place prior to the events of all of the other films. And technically speaking, this threat capable of destroying the entire planet, which for anyone that knows Transformers can guess in 2 seconds what that is, Unicron, making its appearance in this film contradicts the ending of one of the last films in the franchise that was done before Bumblebee. So call it a reboot if you like. But Overall, I gave the film kind of middle of the road. It's not anything revolutionary in its space. The CGI is okay in most spots. Anything that's strictly Autobots is fun, but when it starts to involve the humans, it starts to lose for me some of its fun. Personally, I think if we could get a film that focused on the war on Cybertron and it was just Autobots and Decepticons, I think that would be an interesting movie to try.
I think we're actually getting that because they're doing Transformers 1, which is an animated film.
Yes. Yep.
And they've announced it, but they haven't really said too much about it. But
well, I feel like
and that's going to be about the war on Cybertron, and it's going to be purely Transformers, no humans.
Yeah, and I think animated is probably going to play better than trying to make that live action.
Yeah.
Just I don't know. The CGI on this one wasn't great for me.
Yeah.
I think the part that really bugged me in the end is Hasbro's need to connect another one of its IPs to Transformers in, spoiler alert for those that haven't seen it, G.I. Joe. So G.I. Joe is getting tied into Transformers, whether it's a one-off just because, hey, they're both Hasbro and they want to show it, or they actually are going to do something with it later on. I guess really depends on the success of the film as it just launched in theaters on Friday.
Everything's got to be a whole universe now.
Yeah,
so you've got to have multiple properties. Everything's got to be tied to one another.
Everyone wants to be Marvel.
But how successful has that been for people like, I don't know, DC?
Well, DC is probably the one that should be like Marvel.
Should be, but even they're struggling, right?
Well, I mean, they've always.
That's a whole. We'll get to that when we get to the Flash.
So overall, I gave it a 3 out of 5. Matt and Emma, where did you fall?
You were more forgiving than I was.
Was I?
Well, I was talking to Robert.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't think you're talking to me.
Yeah, I'm talking to Robert with his 3 out of 5. It's like I was not a fan. It's like I loved Bumblebee. So like I thought Bumblebee was a great, kind of reboot of the franchise. And, it really captured the human aspect of it. It did a really good job of being like, okay, here's Bumblebee and here's Haley Steinfeld and their relationship together. And that was really cool. And then this one, Rise of the Beast, feels like it just goes back to the whole Michael Bay formula of just these big, gigantic CGI explosions, as Emma is demonstrating. Jazz hands. And it's like, it's just, and it's not even that well done CGI, where it's just like, there's no weight to anything. And it's just chaotic and it's not fun. Like even with the humans and even all that stuff, like I agree with a lot of what Robert is saying, but it was a nightmare. And it's like I hated Pete Davidson. Like I know this is going to be like, I've heard people already say like, oh, Pete Davidson's is the best of the Transformers. And he voices Mirage, who like bonds with Anthony Ramos's human character. And it's like they try to capture that same Bumblebee and Haley Steinfeld relationship, but it doesn't work for me. No. And it's just like his humor and style it quickly fades for me. And it's just nonstop in the film. So like if that's your thing, then it's good. The film works for you. If you're a fan of Pete Davidson and his humor and stuff and just his constant
constant talking.
Like
bad movies. This is your jam.
Yeah. And it's like, I will say, I will give the film credit. The one aspect I did enjoy was their portrayal of Optimus Prime, because this is a prequel, and like there was kind of like a cameo of Optimus Prime in Bumblebee, I think towards the end and stuff, or it's like where he's talking to Bumblebee, but like at the end of Bumblebee, it's like it's finally when he arrives on Earth. And so this version of Optimus Prime that we see in Rise of the Beast is very different than the version we've had in the Michael Bay films. Because in the Michael Bay films, he's the hero, he's the leader, he's, like, oh yeah, like I want to protect planet Earth, defeat the Decepticons, all that stuff. But in Rise of the Beast, he's new to Earth, so he doesn't really know it. And his main goal is to basically get back to Cybertron. And he is fighting for the Transformers, for the Autobots. And he frankly doesn't care about humans at all, or humanity. He doesn't trust them. So he's very wary of being like, oh, we're going to trust these pathetic little humans to help us. It's like, no, it's like, I'm going to do this myself kind of stuff. And so like, he's very much a different Optimus. And I found that more interesting than anything else the film did. But yeah, so those are my thoughts. Emma?
So I probably was less into this than both of you. And I kind of, we talked about this a little bit before the screening. I'm not super into the franchise to start with. So I'm not the target audience. So that's kind of, I'm coming into it with my review saying that if you've not been exposed to this franchise before, and this is your first exposure to it, you're probably not going to be super into it. I do think if you're a diehard Transformers fan, then you're probably going to like it more than, Robert, Matt, or myself. I think my major problems with it is that it does feel like it feels like a Michael Bay movie. He didn't direct it, but he is a producer on it. So it has those Michael Bay-esque touches where there's this great movie trailer of Titanic somewhere where it's if Michael Bay had done Titanic. And it's
it's just explosions everywhere.
Explosions everywhere. Someone falls into the water, explosions. So there is a sense of that kind of quintessential Michael Bay production with it. I think the other major problem that I had with it is that the overall narrative just seemed to not it didn't seem like there was anything at stake. We learn kind of what's supposedly at stake, and then we learn that there's an alternative to that when that doesn't work out. So there's nothing ever feels like it's truly in danger. Everything kind of just works itself out, and it starts doing that in multiple parts that you never really feel like any of the characters are in actually a sense
real
of danger.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of lowers the bar of just the intensity when watching it, because you're like, oh, well, it's going to be okay. Something else is going to come up and they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And that just kind of takes you out of it. You get your robot battles and they try to weave in some human dynamics through it that just don't really work for me. There was when it first opened up, there's a lot of talk about Egyptian and Nubian relics and stuff. And I was like, oh, I just got back from Egypt. This will be I'll be super into this. And then I was like, I don't like how you guys are doing this. This doesn't seem true to any sort of Egyptian or Nubian pieces. And then of course it ended up not being one of those pieces, but still it just kind of, I wasn't engaged by it. I didn't like it. I guess that's the best way to put it. I just didn't. Yeah. It wasn't for me. And I love anything with aliens. I don't care what kind of alien it is. It's gotta. I don't want to offend Transformer fans, but normally if an alien is in it, I'm gonna you have to really mess it up for me not to like it. And I just didn't like this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to be fair, Transformers fans are going to see this regardless of people that are huge fans of Transformers.
I think that there's probably bits and pieces here that I didn't pick up on because I don't have I haven't seen everything in this franchise that will probably be little Easter eggs for fans that they'll love and appreciate that I just didn't pick up on because while I have I did see Bumblebee, but I haven't seen
the Michael
anything
Bay
else in this franchise. So
and that's the thing. Even then, I've seen all of them.
Yeah,
and they all kind of just run together. It's all the same. Oh, we got to save the Earth from the bad guys.
Yeah, there's very little. There's very little progression across the movies of a broader story.
The same thing is Optimus Prime has to come in and save the day, and
woohoo!
Yeah, it's just oh my god,
it's big battle explosions, big battle explosions, big battle explosions.
I mean, that is a Michael Bay movie.
Yeah.
So Matt, what did you give it star rating wise? 2, 2.5?
I think I gave it a 2.
Emma? What'd you give it?
I gave it a C, but that's because I also do plus and minuses on the old school grading system. So I technically have a lot more numbers to play with than you guys do.
Okay. But
I mean, I do 2.5s.
Yeah, see, I don't do halves, which is probably why mine is still a 3. I thought it had enough to still be a 3 and not a 2. But I think speaking of franchises that have caused people to have issues with superhero films, why don't we dive into The Flash really quick?
Emma shows off her fandom of The Flash. Emma is the biggest fan of The Flash.
Yeah.
This tattoo, so for those that are not familiar with why I have a lightning bolt tattooed on myself, it was a very convenient time to get this tattoo.
You love Ezra Miller, don't you?
No, that is not an accurate statement.
Great Gustin fan.
And so there is a hidden lightning bolt between the L and the T in Fanbolt's logo, and that's what this is. But I got this the same week that The Flash came out, and we went to the Electric Owl Studios opening, which also has a lightning bolt. So I just keep repurposing this for whatever you get to. I'm like, I got a tattoo for this. And then people are like, oh dear God, did you really? But no. Let's talk about The Flash because there's a lot to talk about here.
Oh my God, I feel like there's so much.
There's so much to talk about here. We have been waiting on this movie for a hot second. It was delayed for numerous reasons. Obviously, COVID being one of them. Also, Ezra Miller has not done anything that has been publicly acceptable in a very long time. So I also think that the delay has been beneficial in the sense that we've gotten a little further removed from some of his transgressions, but he has also done a lot of things. And I should say, let me correct myself. Then, because my pronouns, I keep doing this incorrectly, and that's my bad. So Ezra Miller their pronouns are them and their, and I'm still trying to kind of, I don't like Ezra Miller, so I haven't really tried to they have done a lot of things that have been really not great in the last 3 or 4 years. And going into this movie, I was like, all right, I'm going to try to watch this movie and not judge it on everything that Ezra Miller has done in the last 3 or 4 years, because there has been a lot, and I want to try to separate the movie from that.
You want to try to separate the art from the artist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let me kind of set the stage for this. This is our standalone movie of The Flash, where, hold on, let me get my description pulled up here. So we're seeing Ezra Miller return to the role of Barry Allen. Barry is harnessing his superhuman abilities to travel back in time and change the course of his family's fate. And trapped in an alternative reality, Barry must confront the looming threat of General Zod, who possesses a grave danger to humanity without any superheroes to defeat him, because Flash is changing history and Superman is not present to take care of this threat. So now, faced with this threat, Barry has to figure out how to handle this and ultimately make a sacrifice to restore balance and reset the universe, which really was a perfect opportunity in theory to reset the whole DC universe. We're not going to go into spoiler territory here too much, because it comes out on the 16th, Friday, so this will be the day after, or maybe it's already out at midnight. I don't know how these midnight screenings work, but there were so many things about this movie that I didn't like. I will say, for me personally, I felt it was one of the better DC movies. It's a very low bar. So that's not saying a lot. There were a lot of scenes that were very overplayed. There's an opening scene with a bunch of babies that I felt like was one of those scenes that I was really just kind of annoyed by. I hate to say this, but I felt like Miller did an okay job in his role in their role, because Miller was playing two versions of Barry affected by different life situations. And I felt that they did that well. Like, I hate saying that they did anything well, because like he's done so much bad stuff, as a person.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling here with this, but I will say I thought the CGI was absolutely horrendous. It was terrible. The storyline was just I wasn't into it. The best thing about this movie is Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton is great.
Yeah. I mean, to me, honestly, if you've seen the first two seasons of The Flash on CW, you've seen the movie.
Yeah. And probably honestly, a better version of the movie.
A better version with a better Flash, to be perfectly honest. I mean, honestly, with the exception of General Zod in particular, I clocked 90% of this movie in the first 20 minutes because I had seen the Flash series. Yeah. It doesn't go over any new ground. Like, you know who the major bad guy is right off, because they've already done it. So I didn't see anything new. There was nothing novel in this. Tonally, I guess I liked the balance between comedy and action, but I don't know. I'd save my money, frankly. I hate to pan it that hard, but I was not a fan.
Yeah, and I think everything that everybody said, I agree with. And the one additional area I think they fumbled it the worst is they had the opportunity to fully reset everything and walk into James Gunn just doing his thing.
Clean slate.
Yep.
And they had one job and couldn't manage to do that. And I won't say more than that, but that's what ended up happening. And I also, agree that from a story perspective and villain wise, I didn't really feel the threat other than, Barry himself and trying to change time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just, I don't know. It didn't. And again, similar to like the Transformers commentary on if, not a fan of the DC universe in general, didn't read all the comics, probably didn't get all the Easter eggs. So diehard fans might eat it up. But in the grand scheme of superhero franchises, and that's not just Marvel, though that tends to be the one that gets compared the most to it. It was a hot mess.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel for me, like in what you're saying, Robert, like in terms of resetting the universe, I feel like that's just an unfortunate production issue where it's like Warner Brothers just essentially like put themselves in this corner.
Right.
Where it's like, because like, by the time The Flash finished filming, like, they had their story, they filmed everything. And then they announced that James Gunn. So it's not like they could have I mean, they could have shelved it and stuff. They could have gone
They did
in
for
so many
Batman.
different directions, but like, I feel like Warner was like, well, we have this $200 million movie that we finished and stuff, and we got to put it out. Like, even though this is going to be the end, and it's like, yeah, we still have some threads dangling for future in this universe, even though we're not going to go down it. But it's like, it's this perfect storm of just mess.
Yeah. I felt like if they snipped a scene or two at the end, that they might have been, they would have given them, they could have edited in themselves a little bit more leeway. Because you're right, that is a key point for everyone to remember, that the decision for James Gunn to take over and start over happened after the fact. You know, The Flash was filmed, and it wasn't necessarily meant to like reboot everything.
It's like, and we still have Aquaman 2 coming out.
Mm-hmm.
We still have Blue Beetle, which I've heard recently that it is a part of James Gunn's universe, but I still don't like it's. I still feel like there's so much confusion surrounding, like, okay, what's carrying over, what's not carrying over. Like, there's so much confusion still around it. It's like, yes, we know what slate is on, like what he's doing.
Yeah.
But there's still like, who's coming over from the old guard, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, they're not going to flat out say like, oh yeah, with the Flash, like, oh yeah, he's not coming over, and they're not going to, because they want people to go see this movie.
Right.
So, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I agree what everybody else has said so far, where it's like, I wanted to like The Flash, and like I had heard good things. Like they showed it at Con, and they've showed it at CinemaCon. Like they've been screening this movie for a long time now. And I've heard good things come out of these screenings where people are like, oh my God, it's the best thing DC's ever done. It's one of the best superhero movies and all these things. And so like, expectations honestly were higher. Like I was expecting a really good superhero movie, and it was fine. It was fine. Like there's nothing really that stands out. Like it covers the Flashpoint kind of comic series, which we've seen. Like Jen says, we've seen that they did it in the CW show, and they did it better.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just, there's nothing there. And it's like the CGI is just so wonky and flat. And I just like, I recently watched Man of Steel, which was like the first DCEU movie to come out. And that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the special effects and the CGI and that still stand up. Like it looks so much better than what we see in the Flash. And it's like, it's just, part of that is the direction, part of that is, you know, the visual effects studios, where it's like they're not given enough time nowadays to really dedicate to delivering.
They had enough time
good
on
product.
The Flash, though.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, like, you know, you hear about these studios where it's like, you know, they're working up to things to essentially the day of release, where it's like they're still working on the special effects. And a lot of that is because, you know, the directors and the people, they don't have the exact vision that they want. And so they keep on changing in the process. And the studios and the visual effects studios don't have enough time to change, to make these changes.
I think
when they keep the dates.
I think the studios have this issue right now where you either have the people that were behind the Flash and they go too fast in the post-production, and then you have people like James Cameron who spend a decade in post-production to make it perfection. Where are the people in the middle where you spend enough time?
Sure. I mean, what?
Yeah. And so it's just,
well, it's interesting too, and I think worth noting, you know, Matt mentioned the budget. This does have a $200 million budget. So this has to do extremely well at the box office for it to even break even, which I don't think will happen, but we'll see. Maybe it will do better. There were some early screenings that happened that there was good buzz that came out of. Some of the good buzz that came out of those screenings are people that will say that anything that DC does is amazing no matter what, which I feel like is kind of part of the problem. Like, we have these kind of fangirls and fanboys that will just...
Like, even this week, I was seeing like articles where it's like, oh yeah, Tom Cruise called the director and like basically spent 15 minutes gushing about how much he enjoyed The Flash.
Are we trusting Tom Cruise's opinion?
Like, I don't know.
It's just like
weird Scientology stuff or something.
It's so
weird.
So weird, and it's like I have no idea if those are like, articles that Warner Brothers is pitching to these entertainment websites to be like, hey, can you write about this, because we really need to promote The Flash and everything. It's like, we really need this film to do well despite all these problematic things about it.
Well, that's kind of a tie-in too, because we've also got Mission Impossible coming out here in a couple of weeks, so it kind of puts two big summer blockbusters together for media. But what I was also going to note here is that the movie The Flash has been in production, or not in development, since December of 2004. I was about to say 20. I was like, no, can't say that. 2004.
2004.
2004. So it was announced in December 17th, 2004, in terms of when IMDb said that it was in development. It was optioned in 2006 twice. Well, optioned once in September of 2006, and then optioned again in September of 2007. Development was unknown in 2008. There was a script in 2009. There was a treatment in 2010 at multiple points, and Greg Berlanti was involved in one of those.
Yeah.
Then there was another script that was being written in 10, 11, 12, and 13. It was announced in 14 that it was coming out in 18. Like, it goes on, and we're going through treatment, script, development unknown in 2016, pre-production in 2016, development unknown in 2016, treatment in 2000. Like, they have rewritten so many pieces of this movie. I'm actually like, it's one of those things where like you see the end result and you're like, I kind of want to see the other versions, because I feel like something might have been better and it just might have been overthought. I would have liked to have seen the treatment that Greg Berlanti was working on.
I would have liked to have seen that.
I think with what he was doing, and those were kind of the days.
I mean, that I imagine he probably, when did the
we probably
CW show come out? It's probably, that's probably what we've seen.
But became the show.
Probably what we watched in the CW series. I mean, Matt's not wrong.
But still, I feel like taking characters from the small screen to the big screen, and granted, we've not really seen that done yet in a big way, and I've never really understood why we couldn't do that. I mean, we're kind of seeing that now, but the transition's happening the other way. We have these big Marvel movies, and now we're seeing them in like these Disney Plus series. But I also don't understand with DC, especially, you have this established fan base. Why couldn't Grant Gustin have been the Flash? Like, you have a built-in fan base. Why couldn't you have used that? Why do we need to bring in Ezra Miller? I don't necessarily think that Ezra Miller was more well-known than Grant Gustin at the time that he was brought in to the DC universe.
And I think that's a problem DC has always had that Marvel got past, which is the TV and the film for DC never jived together. They didn't use the same actors. They didn't cross things over. Marvel did, and was relatively successful, with the exception of a few cases, in that whole premise. And DC either couldn't or just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what you have with like Marvel. You have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that's it. You have Marvel, so everything is connected. Yes, you have some animated films and stuff that is different. But other than that, it's pretty much everything is connected. Like, you have the one Iron Man, you have the one Captain America.
kind of.
But with DC, like even moving forward, you still have these different storylines. So like you're still gonna have in like what James Gunn and for DC Studios, like they're still gonna have these Elseworld films and stuff. So it's like you're gonna have Robert Pattinson's Batman. And whoever James Gunn is gonna cast for Batman Brave and the Bold. So like you're still gonna have these different universes and these more individual stories spread across whatever mediums they want.
Yeah.
And
like
like
we're still gonna have the Penguin on Max.
Yeah.
We're getting used to saying HBO Max or not saying HBO Max.
Yeah. And it's
but
like
I mean,
that's part of the Batman's world, and that's not necessarily the DC universe Penguin. So like they could still cast somebody else in that role. And it's like, yes, that has, I guess, its own benefits too, but I feel like it's more detrimental if you're trying to create this extended universe where everything is connected, which is what everybody is trying to do.
It needs to be cohesive.
Yeah. And so like that's what Marvel did so well, and like that's what DC wanted, and they just jumped headfirst into it without setting everything up. And like this is what we've got.
Yeah.
Where it's like we should have gotten this movie, 5, 6, 7 years ago, before Justice League, before all that stuff. We should have gotten an individual Flash movie that kind of set up the character and basically led us into Justice League. And then maybe further down the line, once everything's established, we get a Flashpoint movie that kind of resets everything again. But
oh well,
that's not what we're getting. There was someone that commented on my Flash review on one of the social media platforms that I posted it on and said, I hope this isn't the only standalone Flash movie that we're going to get. And I'm like, I think it's.
I hope it is.
I think it's going to. The director's already said that if he did another one, he would want Ezra Miller back.
Keep Ezra Miller.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of that, I've been wrong before. I may be wrong again. I do not see this movie breaking even. Like,
I mean, I feel like it's inevitable we'll get another standalone Flash movie at some point. They're gonna reboot it. Will it be before Avatar 5 in 2031? I don't know. That's still up for debate. It might be around the same time.
A lot can happen in 13 years, Matt.
Right.
A lot can happen in 13 years. I mean, if you look at 13 years.
8 years.
Of when
we're
this
in 2023.
Oh, that's fair.
8
but
years.
I'm planning for the next push out that's going to happen, because it's going to happen.
But I mean, like, it's like I feel like the Flash is a big enough character where it's like, of course they're going to reboot him sometime down the line, just like we've had 3-4 iterations of Batman. Or
Batman's different though. Like, I don't feel. I mean, like Batman.
It's like we're getting a new Superman.
I also think
eventually we'll get a new Flash.
Eventually we'll get a new Flash, but I feel like there's other characters that have a more proven track record of successful movies by DC standards than the Flash, based on this.
Yeah.
Like, I was really, like, Wonder Woman 1984 wasn't a great movie. Wonder Woman was a great movie.
Wonder Woman was awesome.
Wonder Woman was
still like
her into all of the cameos.
That's like the best DC universe.
That's the best DC universe one. And I'm really looking forward to Wonder Woman 3. And the fact that we kept this one moving forward, and maybe it purely was because they spent $200 million on it. And they're like, well, it's coming out no matter what, because we spent $200 million on it. But I'm like, God, like, what was that bad with Wonder Woman 3 that, like, you pushed this forward and you canceled? I don't know.
Yeah.
We have another movie to talk about. So
we do. And it was better.
It was better.
It was
we
a
can
lot
keep
better.
talking about the Flash, but, like, let's talk about happy things. And set up the happy movie that we all liked.
Setting up the happy movie that we all enjoyed. So the newest Disney Pixar entry, I guess, is Elemental. It's coming out shortly. According to Pixar Animation Studios, in a city where fire, water, earth, and air residents live together, a fiery young woman and a
Fire Nation attacked.
Huh?
The Fire Nation attacked.
The Fire Nation attacked. Fiery young woman and a go with the flow guy are about to discover something elemental. How much they actually have in common.
Oh my god, I haven't read that version of the description yet. That's amazing.
It's adorable.
So many puns.
It was a steamy rom-com from Pixar. It's
I love that. That's different than the official description that we got on our screening invite, which was much more broad. It was like, all of the elements live and work and play in a town together. Yours is way better.
Yeah, this is way better. This is the one that came straight from Pixar Animation Studios, so I like that one.
I like
more than the previous one. I thought this was adorable. The CGI was way better than the Flash. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And oh my god, so many puns. Of all the movies we've talked about tonight, this was by far my favorite. It's from Peter Stone, who is the same one behind The Good Dinosaur, which was okay. This is a much better showing, in my opinion. So I don't know. I really loved this one. What did y'all think?
I enjoyed it. I mean, again, coming off of comparing the other films we've talked about tonight, night and day difference. Bar stacks up. Pixar has given itself a very high bar for its films, and that's a good thing. It's competing against itself in that respect.
Yeah.
So I would say that it's in my like middle to top list of films. It's not like my number one Pixar by any stretch, but it's thoroughly enjoyable. It's funny in all the right moments. The puns are perfectly placed and fitting, I think. Mm-hmm. For especially our group.
Yeah.
Most especially. Yeah. I think the film might have lacked a little bit in some of the story areas. I know where it was trying to go with the story, and I think it's a relevant story for this time, and maybe that I wasn't the target audience, and that's why it didn't connect with me as much as it might others. But I felt like that was maybe one of its weakest spots.
I can see that. I mean,
I love the story.
Yeah,
and maybe that's
why I'm making.
Maybe that's because it was connecting to me a little bit more because this. So like this is a very much it's an immigrant story, right?
It is.
Where
100%.
It's like fire is the immigrants. They're coming to this elemental city and stuff, and they're not welcomed, and so they have they create their own little establishment and stuff, and they're surviving. And the daughter of this guy who comes in and has created this storefront for his family and created this whole essentially town, part of the city for, to make a better life. And the pressures of the daughter to live up to those expectations is just, I thought Pixar does Pixar does these 2-layer films where it's like you have, it's fun and the puns are great and all this exciting stuff for kids that are just, it's colorful and just funny and all these things. And then like on a deeper level, you have these ideas and themes that the adults connect with. And it's just like, oh my God, this is such a gut punch.
Yeah.
Just like Jesus. And Elemental is one of those where it hits on both fronts for me, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that, speaking of gut punches, make sure you get to the theater in time to see the Pixar short beforehand.
Oh,
awesome.
Carl's date.
I'll be honest, I went into that one not wanting to like it because the romance between Carl and Ellie to me was so.
How dare Carl move on?
Right?
I still am not okay with it. I mean,
but
I know you liked it more than I did, but
oh no, the way it ended broke my heart. I was crying in the theater. I cried at the short more than I cried in Elemental, and I cry at most Pixar movies. So
I feel like the short should have been reworked to be like Doug's first date, and he should have gone on a date with the other dog or something. Like I think that would have been more like
it would have been. I don't know, but the problem with that would be then you miss like the heart of the short.
Well, but like they're also like taking advantage of people like us that are like, no, you can't move on from Ellie. Like, so like, you're automatically
yeah, they are
before
for
you
a
even
reason.
go into it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, so I liked the short a lot more than I thought I was going to. I sobbed. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I cried.
It's a good short.
It's a good short, and it leads into a really good movie. I mean, again, like Robert said, probably upper middle as far as Pixar as a whole, because Pixar doesn't have a lot of misses.
No, and even their misses are still like very middle tier.
It makes it really hard to try to rank the one over the other when you get into that space, because even for my little bit of criticism on the story, I'm not saying it's a bad story. It's a very, very high bar. It is still a very good, and it hits different people differently. To Matt's point, that two-dimensional way that they do their stories is actually a really great way to put it. And I always looked at that, like the Shrek movies were kind of the same thing. You had the sort of the surface level kids funny, they laugh at it and it's animated, but then underneath it, like when you look at the deeper story, the adults are like, oh yeah, that's hitting me directly. And it's great that they're still able to continue to do that with fresh ideas.
It's interesting I loved Elemental. I will agree that I don't think it's Pixar's strongest, but I think it's fantastic. I'm giving it an A. Like I still need to write the review, but I loved it. I think to the point of what we're all saying here, like it does work for both kids and adults. Both audiences will get something different out of it, which is what Pixar does so beautifully. I think if you look at, like, a lot of people hated on Toy Story 4. I thought it was brilliant. I loved it.
I love Toy Story 4.
And like I cried my eyes out at Toy Story 3 when they were all on the conveyor belt to get like incinerated. Burned. And literally I remember like I went to see that movie with my parents over like a holiday break or something. And there was like a 7-year-old that was sitting 5 seats down from me, and I was crying hysterically, and she was looking at me like, "What is wrong with you, woman?" Like, and I was just like,
"Who's this crazy lady sitting next to me?
You don't even know a small human." Like,
it's like, oh, you'll get there. The world has not crushed you yet, but
the world has not crushed you yet, but just wait. And like, there's been so many Pixar movies, like it's impossible to say. Like there's so many that compete for kind of the top spot. Inside Out for me is probably one of the ones that does what we're talking about here the best, because how they understand emotions and how it is interpreted by a child, and how those emotions interact and what those emotions cause and what that effect has on that human, or that, like, as you go into adulthood, and we kind of see some of like the parents' emotions too. That was so brilliantly crafted. Like I don't even have words for how brilliant that movie was.
They used that movie or examples from that movie in actual therapy now, and it's amazing. And they should, like in children's therapy, they use it, and it's
brilliant.
Brilliantly done.
It's literally like you are going to see, like it is a therapy session animated in front of you, but like in a very brilliant, compassionate, meaningful way. Like, and Pixar does such a good job at that in every single movie. There's some sort of element, like we're saying here, that applies to both a child that doesn't really know what all is going on yet versus an adult where you're like, oh God, this hurts me because I know what a child is getting from it and what I'm getting from it, because you now have this kind of life knowledge. It's just brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think what's what's great that we can acknowledge with Pixar that they're doing that maybe some of these other directors need to sit back and think about, and frankly, critics and audience. Not all films are meant to target all audiences. And Pixar, as they go from Luca to Inside Out to Coco to Elemental, they have a very specific target audience that they go to with each of these stories. They're all important. They have deeper meaning in each of them. And they hit very differently to those target audiences than general audiences. And that multi-layer, it seems to be allowing them to appeal to a general audience while also having a greater impact to the target audience that they're trying to hit with each of their films. And that's what I think I enjoy about all the different Pixar films, because it just makes each and every one of them so unique.
I don't even know. I honestly don't even know if it's about target audience, because like I feel like this is something like everybody can enjoy a Pixar film.
Yeah.
I think it's they put their trust in their directors to be like, okay, we're gonna make the film you want to make. And because like this, you can tell like this is Peter Sohn's movie,
right?
And that like this is his experience. And like at the end, like, you know, there's like a little scene where it's like this is for my parents, or
in loving memory.
Yeah, where like he gives a dedication, and like you can tell that like this is him in this movie.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, so much of just general films nowadays, it's just like it almost just feels like a cog in the machine, where it's like, how much money can we make from this movie?
Yeah.
What is the biggest profit we can get?
Versus a personal story.
Versus we're putting our trust in you to make a good story. And like, I feel like Pixar does that really well.
I think that's a great point too, because if we're talking about the broad appeal, I will kind of challenge that with Soul. I don't feel was a movie that, like, you go into most of these movies and you're like, okay, I understand what works here for a kid and what works for an adult. And Soul almost seemed entirely for an adults versus, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably like, I don't have kids. I'm not around kids a great deal. So I'm sure that there's something that kids really enjoyed with that movie, but it wasn't necessarily as obvious as what, you know, with Elemental or with other Luca, you know, with other Pixar movies that we've seen recently, whereas Soul was another example of something that spoke, I felt like, very deeply and very eloquently to an older audience.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Soul,
that
I
one
feel like, is definitely their most mature film.
Definitely.
But again, to your point, it's less about the studio's target audience and more about the director getting the freedom to sort of tell their experience through the film. And clearly in this case, that, you know, this was a director who told a bit more of a mature story.
Whatever Pixar's doing, just keep doing it.
Just keep doing it. Yeah.
Keep doing it.
The moral of the story is Pixar, keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing it right.
We're doing a great job.
We'll be there. We'll watch it. We'll love it.
Yeah.
You do you.
Cry.
We'll cry.
We'll consistently cry at all of them.
Just don't you dare give Carl a girlfriend.
Oh,
I'm just saying, okay?
Well, that is our film reviews for this week. We had movies that we felt very strongly about, and we had a lot to talk about there. So thank you for sticking with us for what ended up being a little bit longer show than we anticipated.
We had a lot to say.
We're very passionate about it all.
And I'm sure that we're going to have equal amounts to say in our next live show, which hopefully will be live, barring any more screening kerfluffles like we're dealing with tomorrow. We'll be talking Wes Anderson's new movie, Asteroid City. Indiana Jones 5, and No Hard Feelings. We'll be talking all of those in our next show, maybe more. I don't know. There may be more.
Yeah.
A surprise. So 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be back on June 29th, hopefully at 9 p.m. Otherwise, it'll be a Nerd Herd Live, Not So Live show.
Part 2.
But please leave us comments. We will read them all. We will be ecstatic to engage with you guys in the comments. So please leave us comments. Until then, Robert, where can people find you on social?
You can find me at Robert W. Prentice on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. You can find 3F by Space on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at 3F by Space. Jen?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Renlark, RENNLARK. Matt?
And you can find me at I'm Matt Rodriguez on Twitter and Matthew M. Rodriguez on Instagram. Emma?
And you can find me at Emma Loggins on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Same with Fanbolt. TikTok has not replied to my copyright claims on
The ongoing saga.
I'm going to keep you guys up
Posted.
to date on this. So they're ignoring my emails right now for this person that is sitting on the name Fanbolt. Not that I'm going to do anything with it, but I just kind of want to have it. So not on TikTok. Stay tuned. We'll see how things unfold. Thank you guys again for joining us tonight, and we will see you on June 29th. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Night.
Night.